It doesn't come like thunder, it comes like a lullaby. It doesn't challenge your faith, it sings to your comfort. It doesn't break down the door, it leaves it gently ajar. The most dangerous lie the devil tells you is the one you want to believe. It sounds like freedom, but leaves you in chains. It sounds like confidence, but builds on sand. It feels like love, but denies truth. It says you are enough, but forgets to ask, enough for what? It whispers you don't need to change. It flatters you are your own truth. It assures follow your heart, it knows the way. But what if the heart is lost? What if the compass is broken? What if your truth collides with someone else's, and both call it good? The lie isn't a statement, it's a suggestion, a small shift, a tiny bend, a little compromise dressed up as courage. It never says, leave the path. It just says, take a break. It doesn't demand rebellion. It recommends convenience. It's not sin that destroys you quickly. It's self-deception that destroys you slowly. You begin to settle. You begin to shrink. You start calling hesitation wisdom. You name passivity peace. You replace calling with comfort. The enemy doesn't kill purpose with hate. He kills it with distraction. He tells you you've come far enough. He tells you everyone else is doing it. He tells you don't be too intense. Balance is key. But purpose was never built on balance. It was forged in fire, sharpened in discipline, driven by truth. The lie says morality is personal. The truth says morality is eternal. The devil doesn't shout, there is no God. He whispers, God doesn't mind. He doesn't say, there is no truth. He says, your truth is enough. And so you drift, not because you stopped believing in God, but because you believed he stopped caring. It's not an argument, it's an erosion, a slow fade, a gradual cooling, a comfortable numbness. The most dangerous lie is the one that lets you sleep peacefully on a battlefield. Because when you're convinced there's no war, you lay down your sword. You stop guarding your heart. You stop seeking the standard. And when there's no standard, there's no growth. When there's no truth, there's no direction. When there's no conviction, there's no transformation. The lie is sweet, but its fruit is bitter. The path is soft, but it ends in thorns. Do not trade eternity for ease. Do not accept the familiar voice over the faithful one. Recognize the whisper, challenge the comfort, question the phrase that flatters your fears, because the truth may cut, but it cuts to heal. The lie never wounds, it rots you slowly. The devil doesn't need you to fall in one day. He just needs you to drift one step at a time. So ask yourself today, what lie have I believed because it felt good, even though it wasn't true? What have I allowed, because it was easier than standing up? And then do something few ever do. Wake up while you're still asleep. Fight while you still have strength. Speak truth to the voice that whispers lies, because the war isn't obvious, but it is real. And the cost of silence is your soul. The most dangerous lie the devil tells you is the one you already agree with, not because it's bold, not because it's shocking, but because it sounds safe. It doesn't come through arguments, it comes through assumptions. You don't notice it, you don't question it, you don't even remember when you first heard it, because it's not a scream, it's a whisper. A whisper that wraps itself in your habits, a whisper that wears the voice of someone you trust. It sounds like your friend, it sounds like your childhood, it sounds like that movie you loved, it sounds like your favorite quote. Just be yourself. But what if yourself is tired, angry, bitter? What if yourself is broken? What if yourself needs healing before it can lead? Follow your heart. But what if your heart is still bleeding? Still confused, still chained to the last mistake you justified? You're just being true to who you are. But what if who you are is a version shaped by pain? What if you were never meant to stay that way? What if true to you is false to your purpose? The enemy doesn't rewrite your values overnight. He recycles them into slogans. You don't hear evil, you hear empathy. You hear relatability, you hear comfort, But what if comfort is how he hides the cost, because no one sins openly when the price is obvious? No one walks off the edge when they know it's a cliff, so he doesn't show you the fall, he shows you the pillow. The lie doesn't enter through rebellion, it enters through repetition. You see it in a meme, you hear it in a podcast, you read it in a caption, you applaud it in a reel, not because it's right, but because it's popular. Because it feels good, because it feels normal, but truth doesn't always feel normal in a culture of noise, and lies often feel like music when you're afraid of silence, so you agree, you share, you internalize. And now the whisper becomes your voice. Now it's your belief, your identity, your standard. You've never questioned it, because no one else did, and what everyone accepts rarely gets examined. So now you think freedom is just the absence of rules. Now you think love means never saying that's wrong. Now you think boundaries are judgment. Now you think correction is hate. The lie doesn't tell you what to do, it tells you what to feel. It tells you that conviction you feel, that's guilty, ignore it. That discomfort, that's judgment, run from it. That standard, that's outdated, mock it. The enemy has no need to destroy truth if he can drown it in noise, so he makes the lie louder by making it everywhere. Not loud in volume, loud in frequency, loud in your feed, loud in your scroll, loud in your culture, but still it whispers, because no one calls it evil. They call it expression. They call it freedom. They call it you being you. So the whisper grows bolder, not by force, but by familiarity. It becomes so normal that truth feels offensive, so constant that silence feels wrong, so comforting that conviction feels cruel, and now you don't even notice the lie anymore, because it no longer whispers from outside. It whispers from within. So when you hear something that challenges you, you label it toxic, you label it outdated, you label it hateful, and now the lie is not only heard, it's defended, not because you know it's true, but because it feels true, because it sounds like something you've always believed, because it fits the story you've already built. That's the genius of the enemy. He doesn't change your direction with a push. He shifts your language with a whisper. And once the words change the world, you follows, the behavior follows, the future follows, not in a crash, not in a scream, not in a breakdown, in a drift. And by the time you notice how far you've gone, the lie is no longer a whisper. It's your world. It's your identity. It's your normal. That's why the lie is so dangerous, because it doesn't attack truth. It replaces it, quietly, consistently, comfortably. When the lie whispers long enough, it begins to flatter you, and flattery is more dangerous than fear, because fear makes you alert, but flattery makes you sleepy. The devil doesn't tell you you're broken. He tells you you're perfect. Not so you'll grow, but so you'll stop looking for the truth. He hands you a mirror, then blinds you with it, not to show you yourself, but to make sure you never look beyond yourself. You are enough. Sounds harmless, even empowering, but truth isn't always in how something sounds. It's in what it assumes. Enough. For what? Enough to never need correction, enough to never need guidance, enough to never need redemption. The enemy loves when you stop asking questions, because if you are enough without truth, then you don't need God, then you don't need wisdom, then you don't need change, and if you don't need change, you stay stuck, but you'll call it freedom. That's how the trap works. It makes you the center of a story you didn't write. It makes you the author of a script you didn't design. The enemy doesn't have to destroy your purpose. He just has to convince you you've already arrived. No need for growth, no need for humility, no need for self-examination. Just stay where you are. You're enough. So you settle. You stop seeking. You stop questioning your own assumptions. The lie makes you allergic to truth by overfeeding your ego, so any voice that confronts you feels like judgment, any truth that stretches you feels like oppression, any standard feels like shame. Not because it is, but because the lie already told you not to need it. If you're already enough, then truth becomes offensive, correction becomes abuse, accountability becomes control. Now truth sounds like hate. And the lie feels like love, and you defend it. You wear it like armor. You spread it like gospel. Don't tell me what's right. I know who I am, but how do you know who you are? What defines you? Your feelings. Your past, your followers. Truth is the anchor of identity. Without it, you drift in self-affirmation with no direction, and when the storm comes, affirmation doesn't save you. Self-love doesn't guide you. Flattery doesn't correct you, because mirrors don't light the path. They only reflect what's near. But the lie keeps saying, you're fine as you are. You don't need to grow. You don't need to listen. So you keep affirming a version of yourself that never matures. You become proud of stagnation. You celebrate confusion. You decorate your denial and call it self-love. But the truth is, real love doesn't lie to you. It doesn't leave you unchanged. It doesn't watch you settle and clap for you. Real love challenges you to rise, not because you're worthless, but because you were made for more. But the enemy fears that, because growth makes you dangerous. Truth makes you resilient. Humility makes you wise. So he flatters you into paralysis. He says, you're already whole. He says, anyone who disagrees is toxic. He says, you don't need boundaries. You need to be accepted as you are. But acceptance without direction is not love. It's abandonment. Truth doesn't shame you, it shapes you, it calls you higher, it cuts. But only to heal. The lie cuts nothing, because it dares not offend your comfort. But comfort can be a coffin, if it becomes your identity. And so we return to the whisper, not just that you are enough, but that you are enough without truth, that you don't need light, that your own voice is all the guidance you need. But when everyone is their own guide, who follows truth, when every opinion is sacred, what corrects the soul, when your feelings become facts, what anchors you when they change, you are valuable, you are chosen, you are loved, but you were never meant to stop there. You were meant to grow, to become, to surrender your truth for the truth, because you are enough, may sound kind, but without truth, it becomes the cage you decorate and never leave, once the lie convinces you that you're enough without truth. The next step is simple. Keep you comfortable, keep you quiet, keep you soft, not soft with compassion, soft with compromise. So he offers you a trade. He won't take your belief, he'll take your boldness. He won't erase your values, he'll just mute them, because if he can't change what you believe, he'll change what you'll say out loud. And so begins the silent exchange, conviction for convenience, fire for feelings, truth for tolerance. He doesn't tempt you to rebel, he tempts you to relax. He whispers, you've done enough, you've grown enough, you've sacrificed enough. He feeds your fatigue and calls it peace. Not rest for your soul, but rest from responsibility. Not stillness to listen, but silence to avoid, because the devil doesn't always need to seduce you with evil. Sometimes he just rocks you to sleep with comfort. You used to speak boldly, now you whisper with caution. You used to stand with clarity, now you crouch in politeness, not because you stopped believing, but because it's just easier not to confront, easier to let it go, easier to avoid the tension, easier to smile, nod, and scroll on. Conviction costs you, comfort rewards you instantly, but what it gives in ease, it steals in strength. You feel safe, but slowly you feel numb. You feel accepted, but slowly you feel small. You feel calm, but deep down you feel cold, because comfort without conviction doesn't give you peace. It gives you paralysis. You stop praying boldly. You stop dreaming dangerously. You stop confronting gently but truthfully, and slowly the version of you that once carried purpose goes quiet, not because you failed, but because you made a silent trade. Conviction for calm, fire for fitting in, truth for tranquility. But fire doesn't survive in lukewarm water, and neither does purpose, and neither does calling, and neither does identity. You were not built for the shallow end. But the enemy loves when you float there, when you stop diving deep, when you stop wrestling with truth, when you stop asking what you were really made for. He's fine with you having faith, as long as it never costs you anything. He'll let you post verses, just not live them when it matters. He'll let you share truth, just not speak it when it's unpopular. He'll let you worship in private, just not walk it in public. He doesn't take your faith. He makes it fragile, he wraps it in comfort, and teaches you to avoid conviction like it's conflict. But conviction is not cruelty, it's clarity. It shows you what matters, it reminds you who you are. It refuses to let you stay small, and that's what the enemy fears most. Your growth, not your noise, not your presence, but your depth, because a deep soul can't be shaken, a rooted life can't be moved. A person of conviction becomes a threat to the system of compromise, but the enemy teaches you to value ease over depth. He makes convenience your compass. He makes no tension your theology. He makes live and let live your gospel. But the truth doesn't come to flatter, it comes to free, and freedom isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it looks like surrender. Sometimes it feels like stretching. Sometimes it burns away what was never real. So the devil trades you short-term comfort for long-term calling. You take peace and lose purpose. You take approval and lose authenticity. You take silence and lose your sound, not because you meant to, but because comfort offered what conviction never promised, ease. But ease without truth isn't safety, it's sedation. It quiets your soul when it should be alive. It softens your edge when you were made to cut through lies. It wraps you in acceptance while purpose knocks, unanswered. You were never called to survive comfortably. You were called to live purposefully, but purpose will confront you. It will push you. It will cost you. And the enemy is betting that you'd rather be safe than set apart. So he smiles when you say nothing. He celebrates when you avoid the hard conversation. He nods when you shrink to keep the peace, because as long as you choose comfort over conviction, you will never become who you were born to be. Once you've chosen comfort over conviction, the next deception is subtle, not louder, just dressed in wisdom, not rebellion, but restraint, disguised as depth. Now mediocrity doesn't knock you down, it pats you on the back. It tells you you're being mature. It tells you this is what growth looks like. It tells you passion is for the young, boldness is for the naive. So you stop moving and call it wisdom, you stop risking and call it discernment, you stop dreaming and call it realism. But when did playing it safe become spiritual? When did shrinking back become maturity? When did never speaking up become noble? When did silence become the proof that you've grown? The devil won't tempt you to crash, he'll tempt you to coast. He won't ask you to fall, he'll convince you to fold your edge, fold your flame, fold your fire, and then dress it all up in the language of balance. Be wise, don't get carried away, don't overcommit, don't be extreme. But purpose never asked for moderation. Calling never came with a caution sign. Truth has never needed a filter. Fire has never apologized for being hot. But now you hesitate to be bold, because it might look immature. You second, guess your clarity, because it might make others uncomfortable. You delay your obedience, because you've confused stillness with safety. You don't want to be radical, so you become forgettable. You don't want to offend, so you disappear. You don't want to be too much, so you become nothing at all, and mediocrity applauds you. It says, look how mature you've become. You're not passionate anymore. How responsible. You're not disruptive anymore. How composed. You're not convicted anymore. How polite. But what if that's not growth? What if it's just fear with a diploma? You used to wake up with fire. Now you sleep with excuses. You used to be driven by vision. Now you're held by logic. Not because you lost your calling, but because you learned how to explain it away. You used to believe in breakthrough. Now you only trust in budgets. You used to believe in miracles. Now you only trust in methods, and you've labeled it maturity. But not every slow decision is wise, not every balanced tone is brave, not every calm answer is correct. Sometimes it's just mediocrity in a business suit. It doesn't rock the boat, it doesn't shake the room, it doesn't rattle the system. It stays predictable, safe, approved, and the enemy loves it because you look good on the outside. You sound humble on the surface. You fit in perfectly. But you've traded your hunger for harmony. You've traded your courage for credentials. You used to walk by faith. Now you wait for perfect timing. You used to speak like a lion. Now you whisper like a manager, and you've convinced yourself that this is growth, but growth doesn't shrink your roar. It strengthens your aim. It doesn't silence your truth. It clarifies your voice. Maturity doesn't mean losing your fire. It means learning how to steward it. But if the fire goes out, if the dream dies quietly, if the urgency fades gently, then mediocrity has won. Not with sin, but with sameness. You still go to church, you still pray, you still serve, but the edge is gone, the ache is gone, the push is gone, and the devil doesn't have to fight you because you've convinced yourself that standing still is spiritual. But stillness is only holy when it's led by God. Otherwise, it's just fear wearing faith's clothes. The enemy doesn't always tempt you to rebel. Sometimes he just teaches you to settle, to sit down, to play small, to be wise. But there's a difference between maturity and mediocrity. Maturity says, I know when to speak. Mediocrity says, I'll never speak again. Maturity says, I'll count the cost. Mediocrity says, I'll never risk it. Maturity says, I'll submit to wisdom. Mediocrity says, I'll hide behind it, and slowly the life that once carried weight becomes a shadow, a shell of purpose, a quiet comfort, a respected nothing. But you were never called to be safe. You were called to be significant, not loud, not reckless, but undeniable, and that can never happen as long as mediocrity wears your name and maturity is your excuse.